Good evening, everybody. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is a nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We are really excited to be with two very old Charis friends in celebration of Shay Youngblood's brand new children's book, Mama's Home. Shay Youngblood is a writer, educator, and interdisciplinary artist. She is the author of the novels Black Girl in Paris and Soul Kiss, a collection of short stories and numerous essays. Her published plays have been widely produced. Her short stories have been performed at Symphony Space and recorded for NPR's Selected Shorts. She received an MFA in playwriting from Brown University, and her current projects include a novel and ongoing multimedia performance work on architecture, memory, and the environment, and a commissioned play inspired by interviews with over 100 Southern Black women. She is a board member of Yaddo Artist Colony and a commissioner on the board of the Japan-U.S. Friendship Commission. You can find more about her work at shayyoungblood.com. And she's joined in conversation by longtime Charis friend and former Charis executive director and board member, Kelley Alexander, who is a PhD. Kelley has extensive experience consulting with corporations and working with individuals in a multitude of settings. She has the unique combination of qualifications necessary to help people meet their goals and work across disciplines and in their own environment. With over 20 years of personnel and project management experience, Kelley has been managing and coaching employees and resolving conflicts using proven resolution and change management techniques. She is a certified mediator, professional facilitator, and holds a master's degree in conflict management and a PhD in communication. She's also a partner in Inner Light Solutions, an integrative coaching firm that serves clients using a combination of life and financial coaching, and has been an editor and publisher of multiple books, which is, in some ways, aside from friendship, the capacity that she is here in tonight. So we're delighted to see so many old friends in the audience. We'd love for y'all to ask questions if you want. You can do that by clicking the Ask a Question tab at the bottom of the screen, or you can put it in the chat and I'll move it over where Kelley can access it. But Shay, it is always a delight to celebrate your work. We're so excited about this book. We know it's going to be a very special present to a lot of kids and a lot of adults too. So welcome to you both. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to get started.
Thank you, ER. Thank you, Charis. And thank you, Kelley.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. I'm honored to be here. And before we start, I just want to say congratulations on the publication of this book. I'm just really so proud of you. And I've read the book, and I must tell you, I smiled the whole way through. It reminded me of my grandmother and growing up and warm hugs and good food and all of that thing. So I was wondering if first we could start with maybe you reading a little bit from the book, maybe a synopsis or a couple of pages, if that's okay.
Oh, sure. Mama's Home by Shay Youngblood, that would be me, and illustrated by Lo Harris, an extraordinarily talented illustrator. And I will begin. Mama's Home. My home is in a city, in a neighborhood, in a white house, a brick house, a bright yellow tint. A little house, a house in the shade of an old oak tree, a blue house with a room of my own. Every day after school, I open a new door. I'm lucky. Not lucky my mother has to work late almost every day. Sometimes she has to go away for weeks. I'm lucky I have 7 big mamas and 7 houses, one for every day of the week. Mama's Home was written on a train between New York and Washington, D.C., where I was living at the time. I had a conversation with a friend of mine who happens to be the publisher of the imprint Make Me a World, which Random House is the big publisher, and this was Chris Meyer's imprint. And we had a conversation about, I told him I wanted to write children's books. I was really interested in writing for young people. And we had a conversation and we talked about a lot of different things. And I told him about growing up with 8 mothers. And he said, 8 mothers, which most people say. My birth mother died when I was about 2.5 years old. I don't remember her at all. And I was raised by great grandmothers and aunties, and I was a community baby. Everybody in the community took me as their own. And I spent a lot of time in people's homes, and they welcomed me as if I were one of their children and belonged at the table. So I always felt welcomed in a lot of different homes and had lots of different points of view about the world, all these different big mamas. So it was exciting to be able to tell this story through this children's book. I also wrote, as you know, Shaking the Mess Out of Misery, which is about growing up with all those big mamas. And this is my opportunity to kind of retell that story in a different way in this children's book. And I'm so thrilled to share it with the world.
Great, Shay. I have some questions, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I've been your friend for 40 years, and I really apologize if that dates us both.
That's way back.
Right. But I've been fortunate to have you as a friend, but also to bear witness to all of the becomings, like Shay the poet, Shay the writer of fiction, the graphic novelist, the playwright, the visual artist, and now the children's book author. So wow. So can you talk a little bit about the journey that led you down all the roads that brought you to this very moment in your life as a writer and as a person even?
Well, I started writing. I still remember the first poem I wrote. I was about 10 years old. I was on my grandmother's living room floor. I was listening to the news, and that there was a story about the richest man in the world at that time. Howard Hughes had rented the top floor of a hotel in Las Vegas. And it said how much it was. And I thought that was incredible. I just couldn't believe that somebody could spend that much money on a hotel, like renting a hotel. And there are people I knew down the street who didn't have meat every day. And that's a big deal. Didn't have, wore flip-flops in the wintertime because they couldn't afford shoes. And in that moment, I saw what I felt was a really big injustice. And I was so mad. I was like, all that money. And it wasn't that I wanted for myself, but it's like, how come he had all this money? And, I looked around and I saw a lot of poverty. And so I wrote about it. I wrote this poem and I felt better. And I thought, wow, the power of the word. So I started writing poetry, and then it wasn't big enough. And it's like, I wanted to tell stories because as an only child and all these older adults, I got to listen in on adult conversations, some salty talk, which is like, inappropriate conversations. But if I were very quiet, I could hear all kinds of things. So I started wanting to write stories. And so my poem, I got a poem, I think maybe a 2-3 page poem. I thought, wow, that's like, I don't know if I could do a story, but let me try. And so then I wrote a 4-page short story. And I was like, well, maybe there's a little bit more to it than that. And of course, I was an avid reader from the time I was very young. And I wanted to recreate in a way with my stories, the act of the world falling away. When you read a really good book, you know how it is, and you into it so much that you don't even know if it's night or day, if there's a floor beneath you. You're in the forest, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. You're in a forest somewhere. You're in magical worlds. You're in other countries, and I wanted to kind of recreate that magic. And then I always love a challenge. As time went on, people would say, well, can you write? And when I was in math class, I did not take to math very well. And so when we had to get in groups a lot, I remember one of the first things I wrote in middle school were these serial drama stories that were like soap operas that I watched with my grandmother. And, while other people were doing the math homework, I was writing these stories and I would share it with them, and they would share with me, some of the answers. So that was the beginning of my sort of wanting to write adventure stories. And as time went on, I love being challenged by new forms. I was always looking to try something new and different. It's like I love, when I went to see my first play, I thought, wow, that was magic. I want to create some of that magic too. And I started seeing plays, and that's kind of how that was the beginning of that. I wanted to make films. That there's very, I want to, explore all of those genres and just see, because I recognize in the last probably decade or two that I'm a storyteller, and I can do that in all kinds of forms. I can do that in my paintings. I can do that in, in film and radio dramas, graphic novels. And I started teaching myself to draw and going to museums and looking at paintings, and ain't nothing I can't do.
Mm.
I believe that for other people too. Ain't nothing you can't do. If practice, try it. A try's never failed, as my big mama would say.
Mm. Yeah, I've definitely seen you do that, and you created magic with this book, Mama's Home. So I wanted to ask you, your work for me, just as I think about it, it has several through lines and big mamas. For example, you've written a lot about family and connectedness and community. So I immediately think about shaking the mess out of misery and the big mama stories. And and expanding that whole notion of what it means, what family means. Can you talk about the process of redefining family in your work?
Mm. So it began with growing up with all these big mamas who were in their 50s and 60s when I was born. And most of them had passed away by the time I was in my 20s, my early 20s. Aunt Lillian, who you met, we all had the good fortune to be with her for quite a while, was the last of the big mamas. And I, really wanted to honor them by telling their stories. So that's how the Shaking the Mess Out of Misery, the play came to be. And that kind of launched me into this, now you're a playwright. How did I do that? I don't know how I did that. So the money that I made from Shaking the Mess Out of Misery, I invested in going to graduate school and learning, sort of like learning the craft of playwriting, and also wanting to explore other genres. And when the plays were too political or too provocative, I decided that I would write a novel. I'd never written a novel before, but that didn't stop other people who wrote their first one. And so that's how I moved into that. But redefining family really came out of a sense of losing all the big mamas. And when I didn't have the same traditional kind of family from the beginning, my father was in California with a whole other family, and I didn't meet him until I was 10. And so here I am in Georgia with all these old ladies and old, papas, and they are passing on. And so my connections to the people that I began to meet moving through the world, teachers, doctors, librarians, and friends. My friends, I made, some people, they have friendships, and I was like, that's cool. That's like, kind of acquaintances, really. But I took, and that was the beginning to in my 20s when I met you. It's like, oh, that's my family right there. That's my fam. And so it became much more the connection for me to people that I chose to be part of my family, it really became as deep as blood related for me. And so I began to look at it differently, like just gathering people in my life, in my circle, to be a part of to create a new family. And they're all different kinds of ways to be connected to people. I'm connected to people from 40 years ago, like you, and I don't see them for 10 years. I don't see them for 20 years. And when we get together in London or in Paris or in Sweden or in Chicago or DC, it's like no time has passed. And so people give me a lot of grace in traveling and moving around and not being able to see me on a regular basis. Although I'm here in Atlanta and this is my home now, I still have communities around the country and around the world that I'm very, very much connected to. And recognizing that it does, I believe, enrich a child, having a village, having a lot of different people in the lives of young people to guide them and love them, because I didn't know that people weren't loved like me. I had so much love. It was like, everybody's not loved like that. Oh my goodness. I got a mission here, love, because love can transform. Love has the power to transform. And so that's my other mission in life is, yeah.
It is. It really is.
Spread love.
So let's talk about the process of writing a little bit. So how has your approach to writing changed since Black Girl in Paris?
Well, I've kept journals since I was about 13 years old. And those journals helped me to be able to recreate and document certain moments in my life. Like my night, normally my everyday life is pretty boring. Actually, I watch TV, I go shopping, go to the movies, go to the museum, every day. And then I might travel or something interesting happens. I'm always on the lookout, and I, am observant in the world. And so I continue to keep a journal. That's like part of my process. But I also, what's changed is that I think at this point, I have more of an idea of the kind of stories that I want to tell. When I started out, I wanted to talk, I wanted to tell the stories of my big mamas. I wanted to honor them. Most of them didn't read or write. A lot of them didn't read or write. And I wanted to tell their stories of survival at a time when times were really difficult. And when they were growing up and in their lives. So I think I have a much more clear sense of the kind of stories that I want to tell. I want to create work where especially young Black people can see themselves, where people can believe in the way that I do, that ain't nothing I can't do. There's nothing I can't do. And I want people, there's nothing you can't do. And that love does have the power to transform. And so, and family is very important, and that you can create family. If you got put in a family where it's like complicated, dysfunctional, you have the power to create a new family, or, work with the one you have, but just, work with it.
Thank you. I love the little brown girl main character of the book. And so they say that we put a little bit of ourselves in all of our stories. So can you talk about that little girl and whether or not you see a lot of yourself in her?
Oh, definitely. There's a lot of me in the little girl, but also I think when I have 6 cousins. We are 7. Most of our mothers have passed on, some of our fathers. And of these cousins, now, they were young. I'm the matriarch. I'm the oldest cousin. And they now have children, and even their children have children. And so when my cousins were younger, I wanted, I read to them, I'd take them to the library, I read bedtime stories to them. And then they got older and I didn't see them as much. I'd only see them once or twice a year. And like I said, they have children now. And so this book is for that little girl in me that was praying for my dead mother to come back to life, because I believed in the power of prayer. And for the little girl in all of us who wants to be loved, who wants to be cherished, who wants to be given all the possibilities for what and who they can be. And so yeah, this book is for all the little girls in all of us. And those, especially the young girls in my family, I think that I was like really inspired and wanting to write. I wish I had written this story, but I couldn't have written it then. But it's for, these cousins who are, not that much, actually not that much younger than me. But then they were like, my babies, and I still call them my babies, my young cousins. And people think they're like 12 and they're like 50.
Thank you, Shay. So I want to talk a little bit about the illustrations. You mentioned the illustrator, and the illustrations are absolutely amazing.
Yes.
Can you say a little bit about working with the illustrator, and integrating the story in a way that you did?
Well, the story, so the publisher, they were really excited about the story. So I wrote the story first, submitted to them, and then it was during COVID times. And it was, everybody was busy, or, things were all behind. And so this book it took about 2.5, 3 years in the making.
Mhm.
So once I turned in the story, that we were, there were a number of illustrators I was like looking at the time, and it was just difficult to reach people and get in touch with people and find people who were able to work on this. And then Chris said, "I found this young person who would be perfect for this project," and it
Mhm.
turned out to be Lo. And I saw some of her work online, but actually she and I didn't work together. It's definitely a collaboration, but there's a lot of her in it as well. So I provided the story, but you'll notice things like there's a little girl at the end, she's asleep, she and her mother both are wearing hair bonnets. And
Mhm.
that's not, I had headscarves when I was,
Right.
um, to go, to keep your hair, that you got your hair straight and then you want to keep it, intact. You wear a scarf to bed, but the bonnet was like something that came from her own childhood. And you'll see too, when you open the back where there are author photos, there's a photo of me in the first grade as my author photo. And there's a
Mhm.
photo of her as a little girl as well. And
Mhm.
so I was delighted to see that she had put herself in these drawings as well, that she was able to um, work with the story, but also make it her own. And so I saw some sketches, and they would ask me, "What do you think about this?" But basically, she just kind of used the story. I mean, she worked with the story and created, made, that this is from her imagination, what the characters look like. And this is
Mhm.
definitely her style too. If you see her other work, she's done some amazing work. She's worked on ad campaigns. She's worked on Old Navy's that did a t-shirt of
Hmm.
hers, and posters, and she's used to her, I'm going to be talking to her soon on a Instagram live program that she does regularly. And we're going to be talking about process, talking together for the first time, but we've never
Mhm.
actually met or even
Mhm.
talked on the phone. We've
Wow.
been sort of IG talking on Instagram, but basically she was working in her own time and working with the creative team.
Mhm.
Yeah, so but I was very happy when I saw them. I was just over the moon thrilled
Yeah.
at what she had done. It's really bright and graphic, and um, just really, she did a great job. It makes me
Yeah.
happy too. Every time I turn the page, I'm like,
Mhm.
it's like my birthday. And my birthday was just a few days ago, but today
Right.
feels like my birthday all over again. And you know how
Yeah.
long I celebrate, right?
Oh
So
yeah. Months and months.
today is my birthday again. It's like, yay, and the birthday of my book that I'm just so
Yeah.
pleased.
Yeah. Thanks for that. So what inspires you, Shay? Like, and you can talk about just in general, but I'm also thinking about books. Like,
Mm.
what what inspires you?
Books. Well, when I was a little girl, there was I read there's a collection of books. I still remember it so vividly, and I'm still looking for these books. But on
Mhm.
the bottom shelf in the children's section, there is a row of books, and as I remember, they were yellow, and they had little drawings of children from around the world. And so each book, one book was about Spain or Sweden, Lapland, or
Mhm.
China, Japan. And so you could read about the different cultures and, these little kids from all over the world, what their lives were like. And I was absolutely fascinated. When I read all those books, I go to the adult, sneak over to the adult section and start reading those. But what inspired me around that time was travel. I think those books inspired in me the desire to meet people from other cultures and other countries, to see for myself what that was like, to taste those different foods, and that people were to use chopsticks. And as you know, I have had the opportunity, been fortunate to travel to many places, and so travel certainly inspires me, and I wish I could do more of it. I'm itching. My feet right now. I just want to scratch the bottom of them and like get on a plane and go somewhere. I'm so excited. you know.
I know.
So travel definitely inspires me. Meeting people from other countries, learning new languages, and in terms of books, I read everything. I read knitting magazines and entrepreneurial magazines. I read uh, uh, I read plays. I read fiction, nonfiction, literary fiction, Harlequin romance. I read everything. I would be almost embarrassed, except I'm not, for people to look at my reading list. I went into my library. I do have like 5 library cards, by the way. Shh, don't tell nobody. Because during the pandemic, I moved around a lot, and I used I listened to books on tape, and so I didn't have to physically go into it. It was hard to go physically into a library because many of them were closed, and so I have all these library cards, and I was able to get all these audiobooks, and I just have been in heaven, listening, and a lot, and also doing some reading. But I am interested in all kinds of genres, because I think the more you read, the more I learn. Because often I will read as learning. Like, I'll read a book and it's like, how did they do that? How did they make me like that character? I wanted to throw that book across the room. And there was a particular book some time ago. A friend of mine wrote it, actually, someone that I know, who wrote this book, and she wanted to be really provocative. And so she wrote a book that was really quite shocking and scary. And it was so scary that when I finished reading the book, I opened my front door and I put it outside in the hallway. Close the door. It was like I was afraid to have it in the house, because it came to life for me in a way. And so, which I thought was brilliant, but it was like, it's not the kind of book that I would read normally.
Right.
I don't like to be scared like that. But I learned something from reading that book. And I think anybody who wants to be a writer, if you want to write, I think reading is a good way to learn. Everybody can't, go to MFA, or everybody can't, spend the money for writing classes, but you can read. The library is free. And I'm definitely a missionary. I want people to buy books from Charis because I love them at independent bookstores. But I'm also an advocate of, getting a library card and just exploring. And that's what I think of when I think about libraries. It's like going to another, it's like going to different countries. You walk into a library, you can go anywhere on the planet and off the planet. You can it's like a world waiting for you. And those are the kind of things that inspire me. Music inspires me. During the pandemic, I went to the opera. I went to they had all the free opera, Nixon in China, Aida. I just watched all those things, and British theater and TV. There's a whole other world right there of all the things that I watch too. And you may wonder, when do you have time to write? Between living, watching TV, films, and reading. As a matter of fact, I try, and at times past, I would go away to writing retreats for anywhere from 2 weeks to a month, 6 weeks, where the world falls away and I work on writing projects. I can from 24/7. And, a writing residency is a place where you go, they give you a room, they give you a place in which to work, and you have 3 meals a day. And you only required to go to dinner, where you get to meet people you would probably not meet in your regular life, sculptors and composers. And it's like, oh, maybe I could compose. And I think that's where the idea of painting came up, that it was possible. I'd go to open studios, these, contemporary artists, and they would really encourage me to, try your hand at painting. And so that's how, it's like, oh, it's like another form that I could experiment with. And it's like, oh, I love it. So sometimes I'll write poetry. I still write poetry. I still make paintings, drawings, doodlings, crafts, all that. And it all feeds the projects. I probably have about, 10 projects I'm working on right now. Not at the same time, but, I always got something going on.
You do. You do. So I have a few more questions, and then I thought maybe we'd open it up for others to jump in. I see a couple of happy birthday wishes to you in the chat.
Thank you.
So I saw at the end of the book there's a recipe, and and let me just say this: I was smiling, and I wasn't surprised to see the library pop up in the book. Your love for the library is just pervasive. So talk about the recipe. It's a punch or a drink, right?
Yes, it's pink lemonade, and it's in a fish bowl. And that was on purpose, because I do have this secret desire that's not so secret anymore, that I want to write a cookbook. That's one of my other creative passions, is cooking. It's my kitchen is like, I call it a creative lab, because I'm cooking, but I'm also thinking about other things as well. But I do love food, and again, food and culture go hand in hand. So learning about, I make Indian food, Asian food. I'm also learning about the culture when I'm making these foods as well. So in Black Girl in Paris, there's a recipe, and a couple of recipes in there. And I try to incorporate a recipe in all of my books, with a secret desire that I want to someday to write a cookbook with stories and drawings or paintings. And we'll see how that works out. But yeah, that's one of my big passions. And it's a sweet little recipe. I would have put in 3 or 4, but we only had, with this format, we only had so many pages, so they made me stop.
Right. Yeah, food definitely shows up throughout the book, which is wonderful.
It was a big feast.
Yeah, everybody's eating. So I have another question, just for people, those of us who have aspirations in this space of children's books. Yes. How was your experience of the publishing process, and what can you say about it by way of advice for people who might want to write a children's book?
Well, the process has been really great for me. 2 very different experiences. Working with Make Me a World, it was more, I did work with an editor, and she was amazing in helping me to think through certain aspects of the book, because it is a children's book. And so I had to look at it a little bit differently, certainly not underestimate my young readers. And also there will be adults reading the book. So I had to think about my audience a little bit more, and also think about how the illustrations would kind of work with the writing. But I didn't have as much contact with the illustrator. I have a second book that's coming out in April. It's called A Family Prayer, and it's by Convergent, which is a Christian imprint. And I worked a little bit. The first thing we did was meet all together with the editor, the design team, and the illustrator. And we talked about ways that she could put herself in it. I left room for her to put herself in the story as well. So it was really, and we went back and forth about what the little girl would look like. And so I actually had input in that, because I have to say, I wanted the main character of the second book, A Family Prayer, to look like some of the young people in my family. And we have Native American blood, and it reflects it, especially in their faces. And I wanted them to open this book and to see themselves. So so for people who want to write children's books, one of the first things I did, because I'd never written a children's book before, I certainly read them kind of casually, right? But I went to the library. I was living in DC at the time, and I went to the library down the street from me, and I brought home a stack of children's books every day. I talked to the librarian about some of their favorite books, and that was another part of my inspiration for writing the books. It's looking at the language, looking at the structure and the format, how many pages. So really studying children's books and going online, looking, and talking to authors. I did all that. And to really tighten up this story, the sketched out story that I had written on the train from New York to DC. And so I would say first, like, to do your research, what kind of stories do you want to tell? What kind of messages do you want? And it's like, this is not a message heavy book, but what kind of messages do you want to impart in a way? So think about that. And then there are books I won't say in the library about different publishers and study, like, look at these children's books that you love, like, who are the publishers, who are the authors, contact them. People are really, you'd be surprised at how they would be, they'd be very interested in talking to you about their books. And I have to say, I see my wonderful agent in the audience here. Woohoo! Yeah. And I would say that was really helpful too. I got a master class in writing children's books from my agents, Carol and Tanya, who really work with me because I got a million ideas, and they're like, yeah, but let's shape this, or let's they really helped me to edit and revise. And so what you see here is not just something I just like popped off my head and made a couple of revisions. I made many revisions and working with my agent and also working with my editor. And then they also helped me to find another opportunity. So that's a really good place to start as well. But have some great ideas, pitch some stories, and study. And write. Just write those stories. You got stories to tell, write them. Don't just be telling me I got some stories. And
That's right. I'm taking notes.
All right.
I actually have one more question, and then I just want everyone to get ready to put their questions in the chat. I think I see a few, but maybe this is a comment, but I noticed in the back of the book, is it the publisher's note? Is Christopher the publisher?
Yes.
That was really amazing. I mean, just to see, it was really clear that the publisher gets the work and really appreciated the writing and the story. So do you want to say anything about that or the publisher?
Chris has a mission. He is very clear about his mission to create works for young people that are empowering, that have a positive message. I met Chris in graduate school as a visual artist. His father was Walter Dean Myers, the amazing author, and he has certainly taken up that torch in creating books for children, his own books, but also in making opportunities for other writers as well. And so you should definitely, those in the audience should look up Make Me a World, that imprint. They have some wonderful books on their list, and well worth reading as adults, so don't let the YA fool you. There's some really powerhouse books on his list. Yeah, he's an amazing person, and I'm just so appreciative for the opportunity to have this book come out with his imprint, and just incredibly honored by that. And like I said, I've got a few more books coming down the hatch, so look out. I found another place for my stories.
Well, I can't wait for the rest of the stories, or the many stories you have to tell. There are a few questions. This one is, the first one says, I wonder if your creativity is linked to your wide open heart and mind.
Well,
or how is it connected?
I like to think that I am a very open person, and I that didn't just happen. I think growing up with all those big mamas and having all those different points of view, it wasn't like there was just one fixed way of looking at things, because even among the big mamas, they saw things very differently. There were some Christians among them, and then there were some Christians among them who, weren't as, let's say, upstanding as some of the others. And I just got lots of different points of view from all those women. And so it allowed me to then, as I moved into the world, to have a lot of empathy for lots of different kinds of people, and to be open to lots of different, points of view, but also to stand firm in my own, to like really be clear about who you are and what you're about. To be open. I remember early on as a young person searching for religion. For example, I went to the Catholic Church. I went, I explored Buddhism. I explored all kinds of different religions and spiritualities. And I, came to my own conclusion about how I wanted to be in the world. And it was really kind of a mix of all those things. I don't really go to church, but I realized that from a young age, the second book my next book, A Family Prayer, when I was asked to create a prayer, I was like, it's been a long time since I prayed in the traditional way that people pray. But I remembered I went back to my childhood, and every night growing up, I would be on my knees next to the bed, hands clasped in prayer, head bowed, eyes closed, praying. And I prayed for people. I prayed for, I prayed for the health and, for a people. I prayed for everybody. And I also, like I said, I whispered my prayer for God to bring my mother back to life, because I truly believed in the power of prayer. And I had to think of that in a new way as I became old. I look back on that, and it was a way of my family giving me faith, and I'm glad that they gave me that. So that's how I was able to create that prayer for the family, a prayer for everybody in the family.
Thank you. So there's another question about the illustrator. I don't know if you want to say something more, but this question is about what was your process of finding an illustrator? You talked a little bit about it. I'm wondering if you have anything else to add to that.
Well, the publisher found the illustrator, and I specifically wanted to work with, we specifically wanted to work with an African-American illustrator, and he just found the perfect person, the perfect pairing for this book. And so I was really pleased. And I listened to a program that she did recently on her IG Live, one of her IG Live shows, and she talks to creatives. She talks to a fashion designer. She was talking to another children's book writer, actually the book illustrator and writer, Queen Bee is her name. And she worked with Alice Walker, actually, worked with an Alice Walker book. And she, very interesting. She's been working in the commercial world. And so it was really different for her working with a narrative. And so that was interesting to hear her talk about that.
Thank you. So were there any other questions? Here's one here. Curious to hear more about the differences or similarities between writing for adults and writing for children.
Oh. So I've been writing for adults most of my life, and that was, again, it took me a long time to find my voice. And writing for children, I think I took myself back to when I was a child. That was just part of my process, was just remembering. I also wrote I adapted a children's book into a play, Amazing Grace. And when I wrote that, I became 10 again. And in the writing process, I transformed into a 10-year-old, and through the eyes of a 10-year-old wrote that piece. And so when I was writing Mama's Home and the other books, I've been thinking about like what it's like to be 4 and 5 and 6 years old again, and and keeping the language appropriate, but not talking down to my audience, but really highlighting the story in with simplicity, but also with a lot of room for the imagination to take hold as well.
Thank you. So I want to thank Elaine and Yolanda and Liza B for your questions. Are there any other questions?
Thank you, Kelley. Thank you. It's a great conversation. And
yeah, I just want to give you, Shay, before we invite ER to come back, I just want to give you the last word. I'm sure that there were questions that I did not ask you. So can you just take a few minutes and, just kind of.
Well, I think I just want to say that I'm very excited about this book. I'm excited to be here in Atlanta, and being connected to Charis, where I was born as a writer. For those of you in the audience who might not know, that I started working at Charis when I was in my 20s, and became friends with the owner and founder, Linda Bryant. And one day she turned to me. I was trying to figure out what to do. I was like, finished my senior year in college, and like, what am I going to do with my life? And she said, Shay, what do you want to do? It was right before I went off to the Peace Corps. I said, what do you want to do with your life? And I kind of whispered to her, I want to be a writer. And she said, well, writers write, and they have reading. So we'll book you for a reading. I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I had very much to have written very much at that point, but about 6 weeks later, I had a reading in the store, and that was my very first reading ever. And it kind of set me off. To it was I think it was called Ticket to Paris. Kay Hagan and I had that first reading, and I had Paris was a twinkle in my eye, and eventually it did come to pass that I made my way to Paris and wrote Black Girl in Paris. And so I just want to acknowledge that Charis has been a guiding light and a home for me, one of my creative homes, and I'm just so excited to be home again, and to be able to be here, and to thank that place where I was born. And thank you, Linda Bryant, and thank you, all of you. I see a lot of my supporters over the years, especially you, Kelley, believed in me when sometimes I didn't believe in myself. I was like, oh, this writing thing, I think I'll be a chef, because this writing thing is just too hard. I think I'll just be a cook.
Yeah, you were so good at it. So there were so many wonderful comments. I would just like to read them all, but I was talking to you, Shay. But it's thank you, Shay. Happy belated birthday. Thank you, Linda, for even booking you. Thank you. Happy birthday. So all wonderful comments. Thank you for allowing me to, I'm honored to have had this conversation with you, even after knowing you all these years. I'm still in awe and in love, and honored to be in conversation with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kelley. I love you. I adore you. And I appreciate you so much. You have helped to shape this life as well. You have been one of my biggest supporters in so many ways. And I want to, because not too many people know that, and I don't mean to bring you out, but I do. It's like, I know you are a wonderful writer, and I can't wait to see the blossoming that happens for you. It happens when it happens. Everybody's not ready to be all public and everything, but I just want to say, I just want to acknowledge that you have this other talent and skill, as well as being all the other things that you do very skillfully. So I know this is a mutual love club, but here we go. Here we are. I can't not say it. I love you. And I thank you for being a part of my tribe, a part of my family. And thank you for this tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for sneaking that in. So ER, see how she did that, ER?
We love that. We love the Mutual Love Club. So I'm going to encourage folks to click this teal button at the bottom center of the screen to buy Mama's Home from Charis. I also dropped the pre-order link for A Family Prayer in the chat. So even though that's not out till April, you can go ahead and order that right now. But tonight, I know that you want to buy Mama's Home. So click that teal button. Get a copy for a young person in your life. Get a copy for yourself. If you already have purchased your copies, you can support the work of Charis Circle by making a donation of any amount via that link that just popped up. It really does help us. Thank you so much. I know many of y'all are longtime Charis supporters in many, many ways. So thank y'all for being a part of our beloved community. And thank you, Shay, for all of the literary gifts that you bring to our world. We really appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you, ER. Thank you, Kelley. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Good to see you both.
Love you all.
For hosting.